I recently had a tooth break off, so I need a tooth implant. So, Mexico, here we come. Our journey will take us over the snow-capped Cascade Mountains, and we can see some of the volcanic peaks with a wonderful coat of snow on them. That is really what we need. Maybe that'll end our drought. And the snow in the mountains like this is released slowly to keep the rivers and streams running all summer long and also keep the reservoirs nice and full. Over the top of the Cascade Mountains and down the other side through the ponderosa trees on the other side, and then through Bend and out toward Burns, and we stopped at one of the best spots we've found to fish, which went totally dry last year. We were walking across this reservoir looking for fish hooks, but now it looks like it's nearing full, so that's really good to see. Maybe they'll plant some fish, and another year maybe we'll have some good fishing once again there. We moved through Burns, and out on the east side of Burns we see a big flock of snow geese who have moved in, and they're working out in the flooded fields looking for any bite to eat they can find. We keep pushing on eastward. Then our paved road gives way to a two-track dirt road, which we will go on for a few miles out to our daughter's 160 desert acres, and we will spend the night there and then continue on our journey the next morning. Our headlights light up the road quite well, and not a single jackrabbit jumps out and runs for his life. We move into the trailer house, the old camp trailer that we have out on the desert property in the rain shadow of the Steens Mountains. And the Steens Mountains are supporting a healthy coat of white snow this year, and that is excellent news too. The ranchers are all pleased to see there's plenty of snow. We look around and see numerous ant hills and animal tracks from creatures of the night that have been walking around through the sand right next to our little camp trailer. There's kangaroo rat tracks and also lots of the little antelope ground squirrels, which we have. We stopped in Sisters at a Bi-Mart store and treated ourselves to brand new fishing poles. So we're anxious to try them. And it looks as though a coyote has been here and caught a jackrabbit and eaten it, and he left us a lucky rabbit's foot right in front of the camp trailer. Well, the night went pretty fast, and the next morning I checked the bird houses, and our birds that are here are sort of few and far between, but still some of them, and they seem to be ground nesters, not box nesters. My daughter has a hobby of woodworking, and she made those bird houses. So we spent the night, and it was very comfortable. So the next morning we're up early and getting ready to go toward Mexico.
There, here we go.
Down the little 2-track dirt road through a sea of sagebrush. And then we're going to take a look at Coyote Lake just to see if any of those rocks that move and leave a trail have done it out here. Usually every year they have, but we were a little bit spooky that it might be a little too damp out there, so we didn't go far. Sometimes there's just a thin crust over on the playa, and if you break through that, you have had it. There are numerous of these dry lake beds out in this part of the country. They were at one time deep lakes that had no drain, and so all the minerals from the hills around washed in there and settled out till finally, after many, many years, it built a playa. It's just the lake is clear full of sediments here, which are clays and borax and alkalis and just various different minerals depending on where you are. We go back to our little desert hideaway and look things over a little more again before we head out. We're Mexico bound, and we say farewell to the beautiful Steens Mountains as we head south. Marge has to always take one more quick picture, and then we're underway. It's early in the morning as we close the gate and move out. We see a little group of antelope that haven't got themselves put away yet, although they're not one for carousing around at night. They're more of a daytime animal, and they're runners, the world's fastest long-distance runners. And so they just cautiously move out ahead of us through some of the grass they're eating and on about their business of being antelope. They don't seem too afraid of us, and of course one occasionally has to look back at us and see if she thinks we're safe. We see the snow-capped mountains as we move southward toward McDermott, Nevada, and then on to Winnemucca. But I forget, it's time for Marge to have her Walmart vacation. So I'll just sit out here in the car and complain and grumble a little bit while she's in there, and then we're off again. We're going to head to Lovelock, Nevada, and I've heard of a cave there. I think the name of the cave is Snyder Cave, and there's supposed to be some excellent petroglyphs around it, and it's a very old Paiute cave, I guess, that may have been inhabited about 10,000 years ago, so it's well worth the while of looking it up. We head out on the road that says to Lovelock Cave, and this Lovelock Cave is where the Paiute had this legend that there were giant cannibals lived in that cave, and they were red-haired. Well, I haven't found any evidence of the giant cannibals or red hair, but I know that when a black-haired person is buried for a long time, their hair will turn red. And as far as the giants go, I'm still not totally convinced of that. But anyway, we're going to go out and just see what we can find. We moved down first a paved road, and then it turns to a dirt and gravel road through some of the lowland farm areas here. And this at one time was a giant sea that the Paiutes lived high on the hog here. There were plenty of things to eat. The Humboldt River ran through here, and it was good for fishing and made sort of a slough out there where they could dig all kinds of greens and things to supplement their diet. And then the diet was supplemented by the men, the hunters, who got some of the wild game. There would have been antelope and bighorn sheep and lots of jackrabbits and other things, protein things. But if they couldn't get anything, at least the women had some vegetables and roots and seeds and berries and even later pine nuts. We have directions to get there, and this cave is located somewhere around a rock that looks about like this, and it's near the top. So we're going to move around and see if we can figure out just where the cave is. We may have been within feet of it, but didn't see it. So I'll climb up and take a look up around the cliffs. I don't see any of the proper type of material that this cave was in, though. This may not be the spot, but I'll look anyway. I sure want to find this cave. And then on the ground, I see the ground is covered with tiny rodent bones and small bird bones, so there must be a nest of an eagle or something like that right above it. All that white stuff is bones from small animals and even jaw bones. So I look up to see if I can see a nest, but I can't really see one, so it could be in one of the crevices of the rock, and maybe when they clean their nest out, that's where it rolls down to. But we look all around and don't really find a big bird nest, but I know it's got to be there someplace. Then we look for the cave. First I find a small cave which would have worked for a very small cave shelter, but it only goes into the mountain about 20 feet. And then I look up on the ceiling and I see no creosote stains like they may have used it and their campfires would have stained the ceiling. I see none of that, but around this area I find all kinds of rodent skulls and more tiny bones. Looks like a little rodent cemetery out in front. So it must be some raptor or something has a nest high up on the cliffs. On the cliff right ahead of me, I see that like a bunch of calcium-like stuff on the rock. The rock is made of this, and this stuff is called tufa, and it forms underwater for a long period of time. We looked all over for the cave, and we even went to the big Lovelock cave where the giants supposedly lived, and then we headed for a hot springs to spend the night. We chose to go to Fish Lake Hot Springs. This was a well drilled by some ranchers thinking they'd hit oil. They didn't hit oil, but they sure hit plenty of hot water. Well, anyway, we decided not to spend the night there and to move on southward. We have a limited amount of time in our schedule, so we just pushed on most all night. The next morning, we found ourselves in the Imperial Sand Dunes. This is a very popular sand dune area, and a lot of people go out here with machines of all different sizes and shapes and run over the sand dunes like crazy. So we don't see anybody out right now. But on the weekends and later in the day, there will be plenty of them out making tracks on the sand dunes. And these sand dunes are very forgiving. Once they track them up, then the wind blows and you see no sign of the tracks the next day. We will camp right in the edge of the BLM land in the Imperial Valley, and then within a stone's throw of where we camp, there's a great big irrigation canal, and across it is mile after mile of very productive farmland. The sun sets over the Imperial Valley, and then the next morning we're underway to the dentist to Mexico. We pass numerous fields where they're growing crops. Without these crops, maybe the country would starve to death. So they're irrigating them with numerous sprinkles. Right now, the carrot harvest is in full swing, as well as the alfalfa hay. And the alfalfa here grows extremely well with irrigation, and they get about 11 cuttings of alfalfa per year. So this is an alfalfa place, and also carrots and all sorts of other things. We saw some sweet corn that'll probably be ready like sometime in late June or July, and that'll be on the shelves in supermarkets. Past all the crops, we move on toward Mexico. There's some of the sweet corn that's already up knee-high. The alfalfa is cut and baled and in really humongously big stacks that are real long right along a road where they can get to them with a big semi-truck to truck them out to dairies and feedlots throughout the United States. We go past a field that's been harvested where they've had cabbage, and also there's a lot of broccoli grown. Probably it might be getting a little too warm for those crops now, so they'll go into something else later. We went to Mexico and got the first stage of my dental work done, and we're back to camp again. And what a nice place to camp. The sunrises and sunsets are exceptional here. And we're off by ourselves in a creosote bush flat. So our trip to Mexico to the dentist was very pleasant and didn't last long, and then we're up at first light, heading north. We've got work to do at home, and we want to spend a few days on the trail north through the Imperial Sand Dunes, and we can see that they've been rearranged by the wind this morning, and so there's not a track on them, and they're just smooth and pretty. There's a little sand dune village up in sort of almost through the sand dunes from where we camp. It's called Glamoth, and just hundreds and hundreds of people go there to get themselves ready to go out and race across the sand dunes. It's not that far from Los Angeles and San Diego, so a lot of the people come from there. And here's the little place at Klamath as we go by. We'd heard there was a super bloom of flowers north of Klamath up through the desert, and so as we moved up, that was no exaggeration. The hills around are all painted with color as the super bloom is at its primal right now. The taller plants in the background are those wicked cholla cactus, and it looks like there's sure a good crop of them. They do have a very nice blossom on them, but I haven't seen any of them in bloom yet. But they're the ones that have those wicked barbed thorns on them, and if you were to get into one of them, it would be pretty painful. Then we get on a freeway and we're buzzing along. We see just a million trucks, I guess, all heading into Los Angeles to haul food and stuff to the big city as we move on northward. It's just like a river of 18-wheelers moving toward the big cities of the Southwest. We watch for wildflowers and we're getting in more and more of them all the time. And there's sure some beauties of all different colors alongside the road. And as we get farther north, it even looks better. Looks like our windshield is a little dirty, but we can still see them. Of all different colors and even a lot of whites and yellows. There's a group of yellows alongside the road. There's so many of them, and we were so impressed with them that we're going to stop and take a closer look. They're just out through the sagebrush and every place you look, and even on the hilltops you can see yellows and whites from the petals of these flowers. The bees must be having a heyday here. Plenty of pollen for them. Millions of these little daisies right alongside the road, and each little flower has its nice little petals as we look at the horizon and see a few little mountain tops and buttes with a few power lines strung through it as we move northward up the highway. Another time when we went through here, there was a fence through here to keep the turtles off the highway, that is the desert tortoises, but apparently it wasn't effective or is no longer needed, so there's no fence to keep them off the highway. So we always keep an eye out so we don't run over one of those valuable desert tortoises, but we haven't seen one in a few years. The flowers are even becoming more intense as we go northward. The colors across a bleak desert are very impressive, but we have to remember each of these colors is made up of a lot of individual little flowers that are extremely beautiful as they wave their petals in the wind. Marge and I both enjoy the wild flowers of all different kinds, so we have to park and get out and take a closer look at them. Just fields and clusters of them alongside the highway as we move northward. We get out and walk around them, and this is all just open country here, when we never saw an animal of any kind any place around, but just lots and lots of flowers and lots of bees and butterflies buzzing around, making good their pollinizing. There would be a group of larger flowers and then a group of smaller flowers, and each group would be in with their own kind, and some of them, and each group would have a different colored blossom as we move on northward. We're kind of in a hurry. We're trying to get in to a place where we can camp tonight before darkness sets in. We can see the change in color of the wildflowers by the time we get. As we move northward, we see a different kind of flower with a different petal up here. And so we just move on north, and there's even a few of the purples and blues mixed in with them. These have a very nice petal, and they're really pretty. And here's some of the other colors of flowers that we encountered on our way northward. For hours, we enjoyed the blossom of wildflowers just along the roadside, and we could see them clear up, painting the hillsides above us. We were making very good time and watching the wildflowers of all colors and shapes. Then it was time for another Walmart vacation. So we'll pull into Walmart, and she'll go in, and I'll set out in the car and wait as the sun touches the desert mountains alongside. We're going to find us a place to camp tonight, someplace on public lands as we move northward, as the sky is putting on one of its very best sky shows. We moved on north for a few more hours, and it was getting plenty dark by the time we finally found a place to camp. So we just rolled our sleeping bag out on the sand of the desert and slept under the stars. What a neat way to do it, and what a nice night. We see some snow on the desert mountains around us as we move northward. Then we found a place to camp that night, and Marge put a shoe on, and a scorpion stung her toe. And then this little guy, I don't know whether he was playing possum or actually dead, but we found him where we've been walking around barefooted, and he never stung us, so I don't know what his problem was, but he was a good scorpion. Then some lizards. There was a little inchworm dropped off one of the creosote bushes that were in bloom, and that lizard had him in a second. Then, as we moved northward the next morning, we ran into a bunch of the beaver tail cactus in full blossom. And what beauties they were. And it looks like there are more blossoms to open up on these cactus. The fronds of these cactus were used by the Indians for food, and I have tasted them, and they taste something like okra, a little bit slimy, but plenty good. Of course, we're not going to stick to paved roads. We get off on some dirt roads where we can see sights like these beaver-tail cactus in bloom. Not only are the large blossom of the beaver-tailed cactus important to the environment and really pretty, but there are dainty little flowers across the desert floor. And so we see some tall flowers and then some little short, very pretty, dainty little flowers gracing the floor of the desert as we move northward. There are straight roads that just come to a point right in front of you where they go through the desert mountains. And these desert mountains, there was a lot of mining activity went on here for a lot of years. And then when you think you're going to have a straight road, you look ahead and it's windy and crooked as it goes through a windy little canyon. The roadside plants have changed from mostly a little bit of sagebrush to a pinyon forest as we move on northward through some windy little roads in the canyons with plenty of rocks. I don't know what the big hurry is, but we're always in a hurry and we're heading north. We're going to spend the night tonight on our daughter's property, if we can make it that far, in the southeast corner of Oregon. At least we have a real bed to sleep on there, and it's all made and just ready for us to jump in when we get there after dark tonight. And then down in a canyon through the pinyon pines, and we'll drop down into a canyon which was a famous gold mining spot. It had really pure, very best gold found anywhere in large nuggets, and so they've just turned the place upside down, digging for these precious nuggets. And like my uncle said, that gold is really good quality, but the problem with it, there's just too much dirt and rocks mixed with it. So it really paid for a while, but not forever. And so there's probably still plenty of those nuggets left there, and nobody seems to be digging for them. All we see are the ruins of the previous mining exploits here in the bottom of the canyon. That's called a head rig, and it was made to lift buckets up from high down in the earth, and then there'd be a tunnel at the bottom of it, and they'd wheel the rocks and put them on a thing to lift them up and sort it up above. We move up this little road that a little bit of angry floodwater has made it a little bit rough, but still it's not all that bad. As the sun sinks lower in the sky, we're still chug-a-lugging up this gravel, dirt, rough road to get up to Oregon to spend the night. And so it's taken us plenty long, and the sun's dipping lower and lower in the sky as we move through this mining place. I had Marge watching out the window to find some big nuggets, and if she found a big nugget, then we decide whether it's worth stopping for. Needless to say, we found no nuggets, and I don't think anybody else did either. They just are too few and far between. Every time a piston would go up and down, it would push this journey farther and farther north, where our goal is to spend the night tonight. We get up on top and we have an excellent view of the Sierra Mountains, painted white with snow right ahead of us. And so we're getting along pretty well. It's plenty far north to where we're going to spend the night tonight as we get out on Highway 95 moving northward. We take turns just sleeping in the passenger seat while the other drives, and we go right through some beautiful desert country on our way northward. Then it was almost too good to be true. We're at the spot where we're going to spend the night in our own little camp trailer, and Marge will open the gate and we'll go in and climb in bed finally.